Does it say about how and why this war is being waged that the director of national intelligence had in writing in front of her a statement that seemed to contradict the administration's central justification and then decided to skip over it, she says, for time?
Well, Anderson, her answer is not credible. Remember 6 months ago, the president said when we bombed Iran in June of last year, we obliterated their nuclear capabilities. Obviously not true. Why we're back in a war right now. This is a war of choice. And again, don't take my word for it. Tulsi Gabbard's most senior advisor, Joe Kent, who is the counterterrorism official, literally quit yesterday because he couldn't abide this hypocrisy. And Ms. Gabbard, who's been consistently, frankly, in all of her prior roles, has been against these kind of wars of choice, is now stuck up there trying to defend it. Remember, the president has given multiple reasons for this war. Regime change, obviously not going to happen since we now have a supreme leader that's worse. Getting rid of the Iranian nuclear threat, enriched uranium, obviously not possible unless we put boots on the ground. I don't know anybody who wants boots on the ground. Their missile capacity, we have degraded some of their ballistic missiles, but they still have many thousands Iranian drones. And again, one of the things that's remarkable is if you're going to do a war of choice, why not bring in, which the Ukrainians are the only country in the world that's figured out how to do cheap drones to shoot down the bad guys. They offered that technology to America in December, and this White House refused it. And then finally, the Navy, we have sunk a lot of the Iranian naval vessels, but they still have literally hundreds of these small speedboats, which can mine the Strait of Hormuz, and the strait is now closed.
Yeah. We were just talking about that with our team here. The Director Gabbard told your colleague, Senator John Ossoff, that it's not the intelligence community's job to determine whether a country poses an imminent threat to the United States. She only said the president can do that. Does that come as news to analysts at the 18 agencies under her control, including the CIA?
Well, that comes to news to all of us who thought we still had a constitution and the requirement that a president, if he's going into a war of choice, you have to react quite quickly. We give the president the deference, but this was a war of choice. And the idea that he alone gets to determine what is imminent, I always thought imminent was actually a factual determination. Many times the intelligence community says, you know, there's an imminent threat here or there. There was never that indication from all the reports that I saw and read, and I'm a little bit flabbergasted by Director Gabbard, but I guess not surprised.
Well, you also asked her about the president saying that he was surprised Iran attacked neighboring Gulf countries and has essentially closed the Strait of Hormuz. She responded by saying she was unaware of his remarks, which is surprising. She also wouldn't tell you whether she was briefed or whether she briefed the president on those likelihoods. And I want to play something that the president said to Fox News when he was asked by a Fox reporter about whether he was briefed on just this. I want to play that exchange.
Are you surprised that nobody briefed you ahead of time that might be their retaliation?
Nobody, no. The greatest experts, nobody thought they were going to hit. They were, I wouldn't say friendly countries. They were like neutral. They lived with them for years. Peter, they were going to take over the Middle East.
Do you buy that? I mean, former National Security Advisor John Bolton told me last night on this program that he briefed the president about those scenarios back in his first term. The idea that Gabbard and others would not have briefed the president about the very obvious possibility that they were going to strike out at neighbors, not to mention, target the Strait of Hormuz. Do you buy that?
Well, these nations are all quite adjacent. The intelligence community for years has been definitive that if we strike Iran, they will strike our bases in the adjacent countries, which are in all these Gulf states. And the ability to close down the Strait of Hormuz has been common knowledge. So either the intelligence community leadership is incompetent in not telling something that is an obvious truth, or the president is conveniently not remembering what he was briefed on. Either way, we got to recognize where we are right now. We're 3.5 weeks into a war in Iran. with none of the president's goals met. And even if he determines tomorrow, because he's just said, I think about my sailors who are on the Ford, the aircraft carrier in the region, all deployed from Norfolk, Virginia. They've been on the longest deployment in modern American history. They're about more than 9 months now. The toilets don't work. They had a major fire on the aircraft carrier out that long. They will do their duty. But the president was asked last week, when he's going to end the war, and he says, when I feel it in my bones. So these sailors who are defending our country and doing what they're said, they got to wait on the president to feel in his bones, and he's not willing to acknowledge that all of this was obvious if you take on this kind of war of choice. There are wars of choice, but you're then obligated to make the case to the American people and the Congress, neither of which...
So some of the military objectives have been met, though. No?
Well, they have met. We have attrited a lot of their ballistic missiles. A number of them are still in caves. They can still respond. We have done a good job there. But the drones, this is the part that's amazing to me. The Iranian drones cost $50,000 a piece. We are using missiles that cost $2.4 million a piece to knock them down. They literally have still thousands of them. The Ukrainians, who have learned through necessity about how to shoot those Iranian drones down. The Iranian drones go to Russia, our adversary who's helping Iran. They have figured out a way to shoot them down at less than $5,000 a pop. The Ukrainians offered that to this Trump White House, and the Trump White House said no way. So if you're going to go to a war of choice, why not use the best technology around, which is the Ukrainians, to at least take down those drones? And we still have that threat. And we also, as is obvious, the Strait of Hormuz is closed, not because the Iranians have got this big fleet of battleships, because they have lots of these small speedboats that can drop mines or attach mines to our ships.
Yeah. Senator Warner, I appreciate your time tonight. Thanks very much. Also,